Welcome back. Taking your phone calls on the Borders and Borders hotline. 412-575-2600 is the number. Also taking your tweets at Josh Taylor HD. We are talking Steelers. We're talking Penguins. Still 1-1 in the first in Vegas between the Penguins and the Golden Knights. We're even talking some Pirates offseason as well. Winter meetings wrapping up in Orlando. Expected to have a lot of activity as far as the Pirates were concerned. Possibility of moving Andrew McCutchen or maybe moving Garrett Cole. There had been some talk about teams kicking the tires on those two guys, and maybe the Yankees being a possible destination for Garrett Cole, and maybe the Giants as a destination for Andrew McCutchen if they did not acquire Giancarlo Stanton, which is in fact what did happen. They ended up going to the Yankees and not San Francisco. But at the end of all of it, a lot of nothing pertaining to those two players, and no movement so far. They made a couple picks in the Rule 5 draft, one major league, a couple in the minor leagues, and they also acquired Nick Birdie, a reliever from Philadelphia, for some international bonus slot money. I think $500,000 is what went in that transaction, so not a lot of major movement. Not a lot of major movement as far as many teams. Marcell Ozuna was one of the bigger moves, being traded from Miami to St. Louis, but then again, not a lot of blockbuster moves being mentioned throughout these winter meetings. So kind of a lackluster and unappealing winter meeting, so to speak. Let's go to the phone lines. We'll start with Derek in Pittsburgh. Derek, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hi, Josh. Hey, one quick question for you about the Penguins. So the game between the Penguins and the other team, the puck went over the blue line. It did count.
Which team are we talking about here?
The last game between the Penguins and who's the other team who we played a couple of weeks back, and they called for the offside.
Okay.
And there was not clear offside. It was on the blue line. That counted.
Well, I'll take your word for it, first off. Thanks for the call. Okay. Second, we've seen this before. We've seen it go in the Penguins' favor. We've seen it not go in the Penguins' favor. Remember that series with Philly in the playoffs a couple years back, where a goal that probably should have been called an offside changed everything? Remember with the Penguins a couple years back, where a goal that was called an offside because it was supposed to be changed everything against Tampa? These are things that happen. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. That's pretty much the only thing I have to comment on that one. Let's go to Mark in Carrick. Mark, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
This might be premature, but let's say the Steelers win and Jacksonville loses. That would make the Christmas Day game against the Texans meaningless. We'd have all our backup players and stuff. The networks want ratings. If that game's meaningless, could the network switch the time spot to have a more meaningful game? Are they allowed to do that? That's my question.
Not for a Monday night game, and thanks for the call. If it were a Sunday night game, you might see that happen. But since it's Monday night, that's not going to be the case. Usually Monday night's pretty locked in. So I wouldn't expect to see that as far as from that perspective is concerned. It's an interesting question. If that's a Sunday night game, even though it's Christmas Eve, maybe. But then again, consider the fact it's Christmas Eve, maybe they don't do that because they know there might be a lot of an entertainment quotient seeing that it's Christmas Eve. A lot of people might be watching that game together. But yes, if this is another Sunday night game, maybe it does get slotted differently since that game might be rendered meaningless, like you mentioned, if the Steelers win and Jacksonville loses. But I don't think that'd be the case since it's Monday night and it's also Christmas Day. It's hard to switch stuff up on Christmas Day as far as trying to change schedules and everything. So I think that'd be a hard thing to pull off. Let's go to George in Lincoln Place. George, you're on the Nightly Sports Call. You there, George? George, I need to listen to your phone and not your TV. What you got for me?
Okay.
All right, what you got? George, listen to your phone, not your TV. There's a delay there.
Yeah, hi, Josh.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Hey, I just have one question about the playoffs. I'll give you the question and I'll hang up. If Jacksonville has the same record as New England at 12-4, who would be the second seed? Who would be the third seed? Thank you.
That's a good question. I want to say right now, if they have the same record at 12-4. Actually, that's a good question because that depends probably on what their two records are in the AFC. There's a series of tiebreakers. There's head-to-head. There's record in the conference. I think there's record versus similar opponents. All that stuff comes into play. And I don't know their exact records right now against the AFC because both teams have at least one more game against an AFC opponent after this week. So I can't really tell you that specifically right now. So there's a lot of tie breakers in place because of that. Now, at the end of the season, based on who they played and who they beat, might be an easier situation, but that's how they would probably break it down. If they're finishing with the same record, head-to-head's going to be a factor. Record within the conference is going to be a factor, and if those are the same, I think it comes down to maybe record versus similar opponents. But there's a Christmas list, if you will, of tiebreakers that evens that stuff out. Brad and Duncan, so before we go to break, Brad, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hi, Josh. How are you, buddy?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Happy holidays to you.
Same to you.
I have a prior question and a serious comment for you. Can I
go for it?
The prior question is, I would like to see the Pirates get a third baseman. Do you think they're going to go out and find a third baseman? And my other comment is, I think if the Steelers defense does their job, they have a really good shot at beating New England. What do you think?
Thanks for the call. We'll tackle this one at a time. To answer your question at the beginning, the answer is no. I don't expect them to. Should they do it? Should they look into it? Sure. Do I expect them to? No. I would have expected them to do it last year, and they didn't do it last year. They feel comfortable, for whatever reason you want to come up with, whatever reason makes sense to you or doesn't make sense to you. They feel comfortable with the combination of David Freese and whether it's Jose Osuna, excuse me, similar names. Jose Osuna, Adam Frazier, insert name here, Sean Rodriguez, a cast of characters, if you will, holding down that spot at third base. I don't think it's the ideal. It's not the way I would go. I got a question earlier today about Mike Moustakas being available. Mike Moustakas had 38 home runs last year. He's probably the best free agent third baseman out there. He's going to get paid, which means he's going to be out of the Pirates' price range. Like it or not, that's just how it is. So I don't expect them to upgrade there at third base. To follow up with your comment about the Steelers and their defense, I would agree with that. Now, some people will tell you that's a tall order if they do what they're supposed to do, because some will ask you, well, what do they need to do to stop Tom Brady? Because it seems like the list is long. And stopping Tom Brady, the harder part of it might be stopping Rob Gronkowski, because Rob Gronkowski plays really, 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 really well against the Steelers historically in his career. Matter of fact, coming up at 11, during Sports at 11 on KDKA, we're going to have Ed Bouchette on. He's going to talk about just how good Rob Gronkowski's been against the Steelers. He's going to break it down. So Rob Gronkowski becomes a priority. He might be priority one. Priority two might be trying to limit the space that the receivers get on the outside. That's the priority. Number three priority, getting pressure on Tom Brady, preferably in the A-gap, up the middle. That's where he's his most vulnerable. That tends to be where he struggles the most. Number four, win on third downs, and Mike Mitchell talked about that today. Got to get them off the field on third down, get your team the ball back. That's what Miami did very, very well on Monday night. They won on third downs. A lot of it, besides the turnovers, take that part out. Take the pressure on Brady out. When you hold a team to 0 for 11 on third down, you're doing a really good job of shutting down drives and limiting chances to get points. Those are the things I would say probably are the bigger points on the list as far as stopping New England's offense. But the part about it, the rub that lies in there, those are all really difficult things to do, especially for this defense. So if they can do all those things, which are maybe some big ifs, then maybe you're talking about a Steelers win. But that's a long list of things that need to be accomplished. We'll take a break here. We'll answer more phone calls and maybe even some tweets when we come back. Stick around.